put your hands behind your back. Now.
For what?
Before we get started,
108, pick it up.
Please review these
You're gonna obey me, or you're gonna go on the ground.
Why do I need to obey you?
Because I'm giving you a lawful order.
For what?
Turn around and put your hands behind your back.
Did I do anything?
Yes. Turn around and put your hands behind your back.
What did I do?
Do you want to get tased?
Excuse me?
Turn around and put your hands.
For what? Do you know I work here?
Turn around and put your hands behind your back.
Do you know I work here? This is my bike.
Okay.
So what did I do for you to approach me and then tell me that put my hands behind my back?
Sir.
What are you arresting me for?
I'm not arresting you. Right now you're not cooperating with me.
For what?
And you're getting agitated.
No, you asked me for my ID.
Right.
I don't have to give you my ID.
Okay.
Unless I've done something. What have I done?
Turn around and put your hands behind your back.
For what? Are you arresting me? And for what purpose?
I'm detaining you.
Detaining me for what? Why are you detaining me?
You're not even listening.
What did I do for you to detain me?
Turn around, put your hands behind your back.
Was there a report that I stole something?
Yes.
There was a report that I stole something.
Turn around.
You just said, hold on.
Stop, Dick. Stop.
I
Stop.
can get my phone out.
Stop.
Wait a minute. Why are you putting your hands on me?
Stop.
Why are you putting your hands?
Hey,
why are you
stop.
putting your hands?
Stop.
No.
Stop.
You're about to get tased.
What?
You're gonna get tased.
Put
Stop.
your hands on me.
Stop.
Why are you putting your hands on me?
Stop resisting.
You are attacking me.
Stop
You got a
resisting.
call from you with vehicle prowling. You match the description.
Stop
Oh,
resisting.
black guy vehicle prowling?
You need
Really?
to chill out.
Stop.
Over a black guy vehicle?
Stop.
Why are you trying to take me down?
Why are you fighting?
Stop.
You are trying to force
Stop.
me. Take me down
Dude,
for no
stop.
reason.
You're pushing.
Stop.
Pushing what?
You need to stop.
Stop.
I know my rights.
Okay.
Stop.
I know my rights.
Stop talking and stop fighting, or we will use force.
You're using force now.
Stop.
We haven't even started.
Oh, and I haven't even started. Yes, John.
Stop.
Record this.
Additional units.
Why are you detaining me?
Put your hands behind your back.
Why are you detaining me?
Match the description of a vehicle prowl suspect. At this time, you're being detained.
Detained for what?
What did he do?
What did I do?
Stop.
I just told you.
What did he do?
I didn't
You're
do
a vehicle
anything.
prowl suspect.
I'm not a vehicle.
Stop resisting. Okay. You're under arrest for obstruction.
Obstructing what? Obstructing what? Ah! Ah! Ah!
There is nothing more American than a black man finishing his shift, walking across a parking lot to his own motorcycle, and ending up face down on the pavement with a taser stuck in him. That is exactly what we're breaking down today. The case of Mark Domino versus the Clarkston Police Department in the state of Washington. Before we get into it, let me be upfront with you. I am not a practicing attorney, and nothing I say in this video is legal advice. What I offer is informed legal analysis rooted in constitutional doctrine and published case law. Take what I give you, apply it to your own understanding, and always consult a real lawyer if you find yourself in a situation like this one. And if you're someone who cares about accountability, who cares about what happens when a badge and a bad assumption collide, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button before we go any further. We cover these cases every week. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support is what keeps this channel running. Now, let's get into it.
How's it going, man? I'm Officer Lors, Clarkston Police Department. Put your phone down for a second. What do you got in your pocket there? Is that just something hanging off your backpack? What is that, a hanger? What are you doing with that? Is this your bike?
Yes.
It's your bike? You got ID on you?
Why do you need my ID?
Because somebody saw you looking at cars, so I'm here just checking and see what's going on. You got ID on you?
Yeah, I do, but did I do anything?
Yeah, I'm figuring that out right now. I'll take a look at your ID, though.
You don't need my ID unless I did something.
Okay.
Unless you're taking me in for something like that.
Turn around, put your hands behind your back right now. Now!
For what?
The scene is a Walmart parking lot in Clarkston, a small city in southeastern Washington right across the river from Lewiston, Idaho. It is a late June evening. A 52-year-old black man named Mark Domino has just clocked out from his shift at that same Walmart. He is a grandfather. He has lived in the community for more than 3 years. By every account, including the eventual statement of the city's own attorney, he is a model citizen. On this evening, his wife drove his car to the lot because he had his motorcycle. So when Mark leaves his shift, he walks over to his own silver vehicle, the one registered in his name with a handicap sticker on it. He opens a few of the doors, checks for something, and then walks away toward his motorcycle, which is parked on the other end of the same lot. That is the entire crime scene. A man accessing his own vehicle in the parking lot of the business he works at after finishing his shift. And then one shopper in that lot sees him doing this, watches him from her own car, and picks up the phone.
Police and Fire, this is Mallory. Hi, I'm at the crossing Clarkston Walmart right now, and I just saw a gentleman stop and get in 3 different doors of a car, looking around, and I kind of watched him to see if it was his, and now he's walking clear away.
Okay. And this was at Clarkston Walmart, you said?
Yeah, so I couldn't see if he took anything,
Okay.
so I'm going to kind of watch him and see if he comes back here. He was holding his keys in his hand, I think more making it look like to other people that he had keys to it.
Okay.
I'm trying to watch him to see if
Can you
he's
describe him to me?
He's a black guy, about 5'11", with a black backpack on and like a grayish blue t-shirt.
Okay, which direction is he walking?
He is walking north at the end of the parking lot, on the east end of the parking lot. I can't see him right now, so in a minute I'll drive around and kind of watch him. But the car that he was digging in is a silver something. I don't know what that is with a handicap sticker on it.
Okay. Are you able to meet with the officer and show him what vehicles he may have gone into?
I am.
Okay. And what's your name?
Jody Brunel? Yeah, he's clear on the other end of the parking lot, so I think he just saw that car and thought he would search through it. But I'll keep an eye on him.
Okay.
You know what
So,
office is?
okay, did he open the door, 3 doors on one car, or was it 3 different cars?
He got opened 3 doors on this car and was looking around
Okay.
in it, and then kind of had his keys up there, because there was a guy in the next spot. So I think he was trying to make it look like he had the keys to that car.
Okay.
If you tell me what officer, I can look for him because they don't know me. In a good way.
Do you see the officer now looking for the mail? It's going to be Officer Lors.
I don't.
She tells the operator she watched a gentleman stop and get into 3 different doors of a car. She says she could not tell if he took anything. She says he was holding his keys in his hand, and in her own words, she thought he was making it look like he had keys to the car because there was someone in the next spot over. Pause there for a second. The caller is reporting that the man is behaving like someone with keys. She is not reporting a broken window. She is not reporting a crowbar. She is not reporting stolen goods. She is reporting a man who appears to have keys to a car and is opening its doors. Then she gives the description that becomes the legal foundation for everything that follows. A black guy, about 5'11", black backpack, grayish blue t-shirt, and she tells dispatch the responding officer will recognize her because, in her own words, they all know her in a good way. Pause with me here. This is where constitutional analysis has to enter the picture, because the question every court will eventually ask is whether this call gave the responding officer what Terry v/T. Ohio from 1968 calls reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Reasonable suspicion is a low bar. It's lower than probable cause, but it is not no bar at all. The Supreme Court in Illinois versus Wardlow from 2000 told us that an officer needs specific, articulable facts that, taken together with rational inferences, suggest criminal activity is afoot. Not a hunch, not a vibe. Facts.
Or showed up, and I'm one of you I know. I'm Brad Peters' mom.
Okay, I'm Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Just so you know, everything's being recorded.
Oh, okay. So what did he say when you...
He wouldn't say anything to me.
Apply that standard to what the caller reported. A man who appears to be using keys, opening doors on a vehicle in a public parking lot at a big box store during business hours, walking away without any visible stolen property, is not on its face criminal conduct. So what made the caller suspicious? By her own words on the recording, she says she watched him to see if it was his. She made a judgment about whether a black man in that parking lot was likely to own the silver car he was opening. And the answer she came to is the same answer that sends thousands of black Americans into handcuffs every single year. The answer that says this man does not belong to this car, Officer Chris Lors of the Clarkston Police Department pulls up. Mark is by his motorcycle, on his phone, minding his business. Officer Lors walks up and immediately tells him to put his phone down.
Put your phone down for a second. What do you got in your pocket there? Is that just something hanging off your backpack? What is that, a hanger? What are you doing with that? Is this your bike?
Yes.
It's your bike? You got ID on you?
Why do you need my ID?
Because somebody saw you looking at cars, so I'm here just check and see what's going on. You got ID on you?
Yeah, I do, but did I do anything?
Yeah, I'm figuring that out right now. I'll take a look at your ID, though.
You don't need my ID unless I did something.
Okay.
Unless you're taking me in for something like
Turn around, put your hands behind your back right now.
For
now!
For what?
Asks him what is in his pocket. Asks him about a hanger hanging off his backpack. Asks if the motorcycle is his. Mark says, yes, this is my bike. And then the officer asks the question that unravels the rest of the interaction. He asks Mark for his identification. Mark does what millions of Americans think they are allowed to do. He asks why he needs to show ID. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, if I haven't done anything, I don't have to give you my ID. Stop the footage in your mind right there, because this is where the legal analysis has to go deep. Because almost every officer in America and almost every civilian watching at home has this part of the law wrong. In 2004, the United States Supreme Court decided Hybel versus 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada. That ruling is frequently cited by officers as authority to demand ID from anyone they stop. But Hybel did not establish a universal right of police officers to demand identification. What Hybel actually held is much narrower. The court said that in states that have a stop and identify statute, and only in those states, an officer with reasonable suspicion may require a person to disclose their name during a lawful Terry stop. Two conditions: a state statute and reasonable suspicion of a specific crime. Here is what almost nobody on the side of law enforcement wants you to know. The state of Washington does not have a stop and identify statute. Washington has no law that criminalizes the mere refusal of a detained person to produce identification. Under State v. White and a long line of Washington Supreme Court and Court of Appeals cases, a person in Washington has no legal obligation to provide identification to an officer unless they are operating a motor vehicle or have already been lawfully arrested. Mark was not driving. He was walking to his motorcycle. He had not been lawfully arrested. The request for his ID was a request, not a command, and the request had no legal teeth behind it. So when Mark says, I don't have to give you my ID unless I've done something, he is not obstructing, he is not resisting, he is stating Washington law correctly. He knows his rights better than the officer does. Officer Lors does not take kindly to being corrected by a black man in a parking lot. Within seconds of that refusal, he tells Mark to turn around and put his hands behind his back.
Oh, you're very...
Give me this hand. Put it behind your back. Got that one?
Why are you... What? Ah!
No!
No!
What's your name and badge number? What's your name and badge number?
Dude, shut up till we're done.
Do their job. My stepdad right here. They need to do their job. Worry about yourself. I'm not.
Clarkston 119 code 4. One in custody. Units can downgrade.
Mark asks what he is being arrested for. The officer says he is detaining him. Mark asks what he is being detained for. The officer, instead of articulating the specific crime under investigation, tells Mark that if he does not obey, he is going on the ground. Then he threatens to tase him. This is the moment the encounter pivots from a lawful welfare inquiry into something a federal court may later call a seizure without reasonable suspicion. Because even if you give the officer the benefit of the doubt on the 911 call, the moment he approaches Mark at his motorcycle and confirms that Mark owns the bike, confirms that Mark is an employee, and hears Mark calmly explain he was just leaving work, the reasonable suspicion calculus has to be reevaluated. An officer cannot freeze the analysis at the moment of dispatch. It is an ongoing assessment. And everything the officer is learning in real time points away from criminal activity, not toward it. When Mark reaches for his phone to record the encounter, a second officer, Anthony Bennett, arrives. The two of them go hands-on. They grab him, they spin him, they push him against his own motorcycle. Mark is saying, "Why are you putting your hands on me? Why are you trying to take me down?" He repeats over and over that he knows his rights. And the officer's radio in that he matches the description of a vehicle prowler, black guy, black backpack, as if those two descriptors alone justify what is about to happen. They deploy the taser, Mark goes down, Officer Lors' body cam falls off, they cuff him. And just like that, a man walking to his motorcycle after a shift is face down on asphalt, tased, arrested, and booked on obstruction and resisting. Let me pull us back to the law for a minute. because the use of force here has to be analyzed independently of the lawfulness of the detention. The controlling precedent is Graham versus Connor, decided by the Supreme Court in 1989. Under Graham, the question is whether the force used was objectively reasonable from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene. Courts weigh three factors: the severity of the alleged crime, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat, and whether the suspect was actively resisting or attempting to flee. Apply those factors honestly. The alleged crime was, at most, vehicle prowling, and by the time the officer is at the scene, that allegation is already falling apart because Mark is telling him he works there and this is his bike. The severity factor cuts hard in Mark's favor. On threat, Mark is unarmed. He is on his phone. He never swings, never lunges, never raises his voice. The threat factor cuts in his favor. On resistance, Mark verbally objects but does not use force against the officer until force is used against him. He is pulling away reflexively because two armed men are grabbing him over a question he believes he has a legal right to ask. Federal courts have distinguished passive noncompliance from active resistance, going all the way back to the Ninth Circuit's decision in Bryan versus McPherson. Under that line of cases, tasing a non-violent, non-fleeing, non-threatening person over a parking lot misunderstanding is a serious constitutional question. Even if you gave Officer Lors his reasonable suspicion, the tasing still has to pass its own constitutional test, and a reasonable jury looking at that footage could find it does not. Here's where the case gets really painful. After Mark is cuffed and placed in the cruiser, Officer Lors finally goes and talks to the reporting party, the woman who made the 911 call. She walks him through what she saw. One man, one car, 3 doors opened, no visible theft, then he walked to the other end of the parking lot. At some point during that conversation, dispatch confirms over the radio that the silver car and the motorcycle are both registered to Mark Domino. They are both his. She has just called the police on a man who was opening his own car door after his shift. The officer's reaction on camera is subtle but unmistakable. He realizes in that moment that he has just tased an innocent man. And what does he do? Does he walk back to the cruiser and say, "Sir, I made a mistake. You are free to go. I am sorry"? No. He lets the charges stand. He lets the arrest stand. He goes up the chain and calls a supervisor. Mark spends that night in custody. That decision, to commit to the arrest even after learning the suspect owned both vehicles involved, is not a mistake of reasonable suspicion. That is, an officer protecting himself from accountability at the expense of a citizen's freedom. And it is a choice Black Americans have watched officers make in countless parking lots, street corners, and front porches across this country. I want to stop here and speak directly to what this case is really about, because the legal doctrine matters, but the legal doctrine sits on top of a social reality that we cannot talk around. Clarkston is a small town. There are very few black men in it. The organizers who eventually rallied around Mark's case said so in public writing. In that context, a white woman sees a black man in a Walmart parking lot opening doors on a silver car, and her default assumption is not that he owns the car. Her default assumption is that he is stealing from it. That is racial profiling in the 911 system. That is a citizen weaponizing dispatch against a black body. And when Officer Lors arrives, he treats that call as gospel. He does not conduct an independent investigation. He does not ask Mark whether he works at the Walmart, whose car it is, or to see registration. He leads with an ID demand and escalates to a taser within minutes. The racial profiling of the caller is then reinforced by the racial deference of the officer to the caller's presumption. That is how implicit bias moves through an entire system in less than a cup of coffee, and the data backs this up. Study after study, including work by the Stanford Open Policing Project, has shown that Black Americans are stopped, searched, and have force used against them at rates far exceeding their share of the population. Mark Domino's case is not an outlier. It is the system functioning exactly as it has been trained to function. Mark is booked on 2 misdemeanors, obstructing a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest. The next morning, he is released. The body cam footage and a cell phone video taken by a bystander start circulating online. Within a few days, the clips have gone viral. Thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. People are watching this quiet black man get tased in a Walmart parking lot for trying to leave his own job. The Clarkston Police Department, under then-Chief Joel Hastings, announces an internal investigation. This is standard procedure anytime a taser is deployed. Spoiler alert for anyone who has watched more than 2 of these videos, the internal investigation clears both officers of any wrongdoing. No discipline, no retraining on the record, no acknowledgement that anything went wrong. 5 months after the incident, Mark is in court. The city offers him a deal: accept a 90-day deferment, stay out of trouble for 90 days, and the charges will be dismissed. On its face, this looks like a win. Mark initially accepts. But then, after reflecting on what that deal actually means, he reverses course, because a deferment is not a dismissal. A deferment says, "We could convict you, but we will let you off if you behave." That framing preserves the narrative that Mark did something wrong, and Mark refuses to accept that narrative. So he fights. He files a $5 million tort claim against the city for constitutional violations. He represents himself. He walks into the Assauton County District Court and files a 34-page motion to dismiss all charges. He argues Washington law. He cites the constitutional standards. He makes his case not as a criminal defendant, but as a citizen who has studied the statutes. A community supporter named Mary Minton organizes rallies and a social media campaign around him. Protesters show up at the courthouse. About 1 year and 2 months after the incident, Mark gets his hearing on the motion to dismiss. Judge Tina Kernan hears argument. Mark stands at the podium representing himself. He asks to see Clarkston Police Department policy on stops and handcuffing. He argues that what happened to him was not a lawful Terry stop. He demands to see the written standards the department claims to have followed. The judge agrees to release the requested policies, but does not dismiss the charges. She sets the case for jury trial. Outside the courthouse, the city attorney is quoted saying he believes Mark is looking beyond this case and trying to get money from the city. Let me name that framing for what it is. When a black man stands up to an unlawful arrest, the system reaches for the narrative that he is exploiting his own victimization for profit. That framing is itself a form of racial harm. It strips Mark of his dignity as a citizen defending a constitutional principle and reduces him to a man looking for a payday. About 2 weeks before the scheduled jury trial, Mark arrives at court for a pretrial hearing. The city attorney pulls him into a side conference room. An hour later, they emerge. All charges are dismissed. The city agrees to pay Mark $25,000 to resolve his tort claim. Every penny comes from the city's insurance carrier, not general funds. The dismissal is not labeled an admission of wrongdoing by either party. What really happened in that conference room? On the public record, the city's own attorney admitted that the abrupt reversal was driven by input from the city's insurance carrier. Translation? The insurance company looked at the footage, looked at the Washington precedent on identification, looked at the Graham analysis on the use of force, and told the city that going to trial was more financial risk than paying $25,000 to make it go away. That is not justice. That is actuarial science. Outside the courtroom, Mark made his position clear. He said this was never about the money. He said what he wanted from the beginning was an apology, and instead, he was persecuted. He said he did not want this to happen to anyone else. He never received the apology he asked for. The officers involved, Chris Lors and Anthony Bennett, were never disciplined for this incident. The internal investigation that cleared them stood. They continued their duties. No demotion. No suspension on the public record. No retraining the city acknowledged. When we talk about qualified immunity and the doctrine that protects officers from personal civil liability, this case is a textbook study. The taxpayers, through the insurance pool, paid for what the officers did. The officers paid nothing. And this is where accountability goes to die in America. Because as long as the financial consequences of an unconstitutional arrest are borne by an insurance pool rather than the individual badge, the incentive to change individual officer behavior approaches zero. The next Mark Domino in Clarkston will face the same officers with the same training under the same assumptions. About 2 years after the incident, the state of Washington passed one of the most significant packages of police accountability legislation in the country. That package, responding to a national wave of protest, banned chokeholds and neck restraints. It required officers to intervene when another officer uses excessive force. It mandated de-escalation. It created an independent office to review deadly force. Those reforms did not come from Mark Domino's case alone, but cases like his, parking lot cases where a black citizen was brutalized over a paperwork misunderstanding, formed the political foundation for that entire reform package. Mark's case was frequently cited by advocates as an example of exactly the kind of encounter those laws were designed to prevent. That is the broader legacy. Not the check, not the dismissal, the law. So let me pull this together for everybody watching. Here is what you take away from the Mark Domino case. First, know the law in your state. Washington is not a stop and identify state. Many states are not. If you do not know the status of your own state's law, find out today. Because the officer standing in front of you may not know it either, and that ignorance can cost you your freedom. Second, exercising your rights is not resisting arrest. Asking why you are being detained is not obstruction. Declining to produce ID when the law does not require it is not a crime. If an officer treats those questions as defiance, that is an officer who does not understand the job. Third, document everything. Mark's encounter was captured on body cam and on a bystander's phone. Without that footage, the city's narrative of a struggle with a non-compliant suspect would have been the only version of events. The footage is what moved the insurance carrier. The footage is what built the community pressure. Fourth, and this one is especially for my black viewers, the system is not always going to rescue you. You may have to rescue yourself. Mark Domino represented himself. He filed his own 34-page motion. He studied the statutes. He did not wait for a lawyer in shining armor. The community organized around him because he organized around himself first. And for any officer watching this, let me offer a word. Reasonable suspicion is not a vibe. It is an articulable, fact-based judgment that criminal activity is afoot. A 911 call from a private citizen who does not recognize your community member is not a fact. It is a starting point. Your training tells you, or should tell you, to verify and reevaluate as you learn more. Mark told Officer Lors within the first minute that he worked there, and the bike was his. That information changes the analysis. Ignoring it because a caller on the phone made a racial assumption is not policing, it is deference to a civilian's bias. And if you are uncertain about whether your state even has a stop and identify statute, find out before your next shift. Because demanding ID in a state that does not require it, and escalating to force when it is refused, is how cities write $25,000 checks. Mark Domino went to work one evening. He finished his shift. He walked to his bike. Because a woman in the same parking lot looked at him and did not see a coworker, did not see a neighbor, did not see a grandfather, but saw a threat, he ended that evening tased, cuffed, and jailed. Because an officer did not understand the law of his own state, that injustice became a criminal case. Because Mark knew his own rights and fought for them for over a year, that criminal case became a civil rights teaching moment for a community, a state, and a country. The $25,000 check is a footnote. The real story is the discipline, the patience, and the constitutional literacy of one black man who refused to plead guilty to a crime he did not commit. That is the lesson I want you to take with you. If this breakdown hit for you, drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Tell me the state you live in and whether you know your own state's stop and identify status. Share this video with somebody who needs to see it, and if you have not yet, subscribe and hit the bell so the next case lands in your feed. Until next time, stay informed, stay documented, and know your rights.
What's his name? His name?
Paul. Yeah. This is Officer Allison with the DWI unit.
How you doing, Paul?
I guess they've got more stuff they're working on right now. Authority of the chief's office. So he's just going to talk to you a little bit here. Just listen to what he's got to say, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay.
The moment Officer Paul Fensick walked through that door, his own sergeant and lieutenant clocked it immediately. Something was off. His eyes, his movement, his energy. Whatever it was the people trained to notice exactly this kind of thing noticed. But here's the part that should make your stomach drop.
Lawyer present to advise you in a court while your trial. You may have your own lawyer present, or if you're unable to employ a lawyer, the court will appoint a lawyer free of charge and not at the time you want. If you decide to talk to anyone, you can. You can stop talking to them anytime you want. The above rights and continued rights may be urged by any stage of proceedings. Paul, do you understand these rights as I've read them to you?
Yes.
Okay, Paul, would you be willing to submit this field sobriety test?
A field sobriety test?
Yes, sir. A standardized field sobriety test.
Even after they noticed, he still got into a marked patrol vehicle and drove away. A cop, drunk, behind the wheel of a police car at 6 in the morning. And when they finally caught up to him, tested him, and arrested him right there in his own station, his blood alcohol came back at more than twice the legal limit. A cooler full of beer in the trunk. An open container in the center console. This wasn't a lapse. This was a routine. And that word, routine, is exactly what I want to sit with today. Because this story isn't just about one drunk cop in San Antonio. This is about what it means when the people with the badge, the gun, the authority to make split-second decisions about your life show up like this. And if you look a certain way in America, you already know why that matters more than most people want to admit. Before we get into it, if you're new here, this channel is dedicated to documenting, analyzing, and calling out the systems that put black lives at risk every single day in this country. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications, because we're not letting these stories disappear into the news cycle. Now, let's get into it. Let me paint this picture properly, because the setting matters enormously here.
You didn't harm them.
Yeah, you wonder if that comes from his background.
We're all on the same team. People don't realize it.
It doesn't seem that there's any connection between these parties, but
Nobody wants to be here, Paul. I promise you that. But we do have to make a decision on what you want to do.
Well, I can't refuse.
It's your choice. You
If I refuse, I go to jail.
You can refuse the P-test. At this point, what you do is all up to you. But right now, this isn't administrative stuff, so this is all you do.
To be honest with you, at this point, Paul, your supervisor out of the equation. It's really Officer Allison. And again, like I said, nobody wants to be here, but here we are. So moving forward, it has nothing to do with them. It's you either want to participate with the field sobriety test or you don't.
This is not a traffic stop on a highway at 2 a.m. This is not some off-duty incident at a bar on a Saturday night. This happened at roll call, inside a police substation, at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, July 31st, 2025. Roll call, for those who don't know, is where officers begin their shift. It's where supervisors give assignments, review protocols, and assess their team. It is, by definition, the moment when a commanding officer looks their people in the eye and determines whether they are fit for duty. And Paul Fensick, 18-year veteran of the San Antonio Police Department, walked into that room drunk. Not buzzed, not had a drink the night before. We're talking a BAC of 0.15 or above. The legal limit in Texas is 0.08. He was nearly double that, and Texas law specifically elevates a DWI to a Class A misdemeanor when the BAC hits 0.15 or higher. That carries up to a year in county jail and fines up to $4,000. His supervisors saw it right away. Credit where it's due, they did not look the other way. A lieutenant and sergeant were reportedly both present. And they called it, but, and this is critical, there was a gap. Because somewhere in that gap between we see something wrong and we do something about it, Fensick got into a marked patrol vehicle and drove. There's video of it.
Would you be willing to submit to that?
I wasn't driving.
Evidently, you have been driving, I guess. So that's where this is.
I was in the parking lot.
We know this because when Fensick tells Officer Allison during the sobriety test that he wasn't driving, that he was just in the parking lot, Officer Allison responds plainly, "Yeah, I guess there's video of you driving." Think about that. The man is standing in his own station, talking to a DWI officer, being told there's footage of him operating a police vehicle while drunk, and his first move is to deny it. That tells you something about the mindset. That tells you something about the culture of protection and deflection that exists in law enforcement, even when you are caught in your own building, by your own people. The instinct is still to minimize, deny, and redirect. Now, I want to be clear, his colleagues ultimately did the right thing, and we are going to talk about that. But we also need to talk about what could have happened in that window, what almost happened, and what does happen every single day when nobody in that roll call room feels empowered to intervene. We have audio and transcripts from inside the station that day, and I want to walk through some of what was captured because it's revealing in ways that go beyond just the facts of the case. When Officer Allison arrives to conduct the field sobriety evaluation, Fensick is already known to the people in that room. He's not a suspect they pulled off the street. He is a colleague. An 18-year veteran. Someone these officers have presumably worked alongside, eaten lunch with, maybe even trusted with their lives in the field. And you can hear that tension in the conversation. At one point, before Fensick agrees to take the test, one of the supervisors says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Nobody wants to be here, Paul. I promise you that. Nobody wants to be here." Read that again. Nobody wants to be here. And I understand, on a human level, what that means. It is genuinely uncomfortable to arrest a colleague. It is uncomfortable to watch someone you work with be put in handcuffs. There is real institutional loyalty in policing. Sometimes it functions as camaraderie. Sometimes it functions as obstruction. In this case, the officers moved forward, but the language tells you what was pulling in the other direction.
Sir, you're going to take 9 heel-to-toe steps straight along that imaginary line. As you're walking along that line, you're going to look down at your feet, count your steps out loud, looking down at your feet. Once you start, you can't stop. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate 3 steps. You're going to do 9, and then I'll simulate the turn and steps back. Okay, once I tell you to begin, what you're going to do, you're going to walk along that imaginary line just like so. 1, 2, 3. This is your simulated 9th step. Once you get to your 9th step, you can take a series of small turns and steps in a safe and controlled manner to create a turn. 9 heel-to-toe steps back. 1, 2, 3. Again, Paul, once I tell you to start, make sure you're walking along that line, touching heel-to-toe, arms by your side, counting your steps out loud.
Fensick himself asks more than once whether refusing the test would mean going to jail. He's trying to find an exit. He says at one point, "I can't refuse," and another officer tells him, "This is all you at this point, Paul." Eventually, Fenzik agrees, and what follows is a full standardized field sobriety evaluation, the same battery of tests that police officers administer to civilians every single day on the side of the road. The horizontal gaze nystagmus, tracking a pen with the eyes, the walk and turn 9 heel-to-toe steps, a controlled turn 9 steps back. The one-leg stand, raising 1 foot 6 inches off the ground, counting out loud. The Romberg balance test, head back, eyes closed, estimate 30 seconds. The finger-to-nose test, the alphabet from C to P, counting backwards from 54 to 41. Fenzik went through all of it. He completed the tests. And there's something almost surreal about watching a trained police officer, someone who has administered these exact evaluations to civilians, who knows exactly what officers are looking for, who could probably recite the scoring criteria in his sleep, going through them himself. He skips 50 in the countdown, he's got some wobble, and at the end of it, the conclusion is clear. He gets arrested. In his own station, by his own department. Officer Allison wraps up the evaluation and says, "I'm going to have to do that uncomfortable thing." And Fenzik turns around. 18 years on the force, thousands of arrests, and now he's the one with his hands behind his back. Here is the detail that changes everything. When officers searched Fenzik's patrol vehicle, the marked police car he drove while drunk, they found 2 things. An open beer container in the center console, and a cooler full of unopened beer in the car. Let that sink in. Not a flask, not a bottle of something he was trying to hide. A cooler, stocked and ready, in a police cruiser, at the start of a morning shift. That is not a bad night that bled into a bad morning. That is not a one-time mistake made under unusual circumstances. That is infrastructure. That is preparation. That is somebody who had done this or something very close to it before and had a system. The question the transcript itself poses is the right one. How many mornings before this one looked exactly the same and nobody knew? And I want to extend that question because this is where it becomes about more than Paul Fenzik. How many mornings did he go out on patrol like this? How many traffic stops did he make? How many pedestrians did he interact with? How many people, disproportionately black people, because that is simply the reality of policing in cities like San Antonio, were pulled over, questioned, searched, or arrested by a man who was drunk on duty? We don't know. And that's the horror of it. Because the criminal justice system treats officer misconduct as isolated incidents. Every internal affairs investigation, every disciplinary hearing, every lawsuit, they're all built around the specific incident in front of them. But what you don't get is the full accounting. You don't get to audit an 18-year career through the lens of what we now know about this man's habits. Think about what it means to be stopped by an impaired officer. Your fate in that moment is in the hands of someone whose judgment is compromised, whose reflexes are slower, whose emotional regulation, already a known issue in high-stress professions, is further degraded by alcohol. And if something goes wrong, if he makes the wrong call, draws his weapon, escalates a situation that didn't need to be escalated, the burden of that falls on the person standing in front of him. Not on Paul Fenzik, on the civilian. This is the part that does not make the press release. The SAPD statement is clean and institutional. Chief McManus calls it a clear violation of the public's trust. He requests expedited termination proceedings, and that is the right response procedurally. But it doesn't touch what I just described. Now I want to talk about the thing that this story is really about, for this channel and for the community watching. When we talk about dangerous cops, impaired cops, unstable cops, cops who carry unprocessed trauma, addiction, or aggression onto the job, we have to talk about who bears the cost of that. And the answer, consistently, disproportionately, documentably, is black people. San Antonio is a majority-minority city. Its South Patrol District, where Fenzik was assigned, covers communities that are predominantly Hispanic and black. When an impaired officer is out on patrol in those neighborhoods, the people most likely to encounter him are people of color. That's not a political statement. That's demographics. And here's what we know about how impaired judgment interacts with implicit bias in policing. Study after study has shown that racial bias and use of force decisions is not primarily a function of overt racism. It's a function of automatic, fast, fear-based processing. The kind of processing that kicks in when an officer is in a high-stress moment and doesn't have time to think carefully. The kind of processing that is made worse by substances. The kind of processing that leads to a black man being perceived as more threatening, more non-compliant, more dangerous in the fraction of a second before a decision is made. Now, add alcohol to that. Add 0.15 back to that equation. Add slower reaction time. Add impaired emotional regulation. Add a man who, based on the evidence, had been doing this long enough to bring a stocked cooler with him to work. That is not a public servant. That is a loaded weapon pointed at a community. And I want to talk about what trigger happy actually means in this context, because it's not just a figure of speech. There is documented research on how alcohol affects decision-making in use-of-force scenarios. A 2020 study published in the journal Police Quarterly examined how impairment affects officers' threat perception and found that impaired officers were both slower to respond to actual threats and more likely to misidentify non-threatening behavior as threatening. That is the worst possible combination. You are less capable of protecting yourself or others from actual danger, while simultaneously more likely to create danger where there wasn't any. What does that look like on a traffic stop in a black neighborhood at 7 in the morning? It looks like Philando Castile reaching for his ID and an officer panicking. It looks like Breonna Taylor's apartment being stormed based on faulty information by officers who were not operating with clear minds and clear protocols. It looks like Walter Scott running from a traffic stop and an officer deciding that running warranted death. I am not saying Paul Fensick would have done any of those things. I am saying that impaired judgment, racial bias, and a gun are a combination that has already produced those outcomes repeatedly in documented cases with no accountability, and that every drunk officer on patrol represents that risk, made worse. And here's what makes it land differently when you're black in America. You don't get to know. You don't get to ask the officer who pulled you over whether he's been drinking. You don't get a heads up. You just get the flashing lights in your rearview mirror, and in the seconds that follow, your life is at the mercy of whoever is walking towards you. That's the reality. And it's why what happened on July 31st matters far beyond San Antonio. I said earlier that credit goes to the colleagues and supervisors who noticed and who acted. And I mean that. They did what the system is supposed to do. But let's be honest about how close it came to going differently. The supervisors noticed at roll call. They did not immediately prevent him from accessing a vehicle. There was a gap enough of one that Fensick got into that patrol car and drove. If that gap had been a little longer, he'd have been out on the streets. And the reason that gap exists is cultural. In police departments across this country, there is enormous pressure, spoken and unspoken, to protect your own. The phrase, "nobody wants to be here," Paul captures it perfectly. Even in a case this clear-cut, a man visibly drunk at 6 in the morning with a cooler of beer in his trunk, the atmosphere in that room was one of reluctance, of discomfort, of wishing it weren't happening. That reluctance is the crack in the system. And in cases where the evidence isn't this obvious, where an officer has a bad attitude, uses excessive force, makes racially charged comments, handles a situation poorly, that reluctance becomes a wall that protects officers and exposes communities. The data backs this up. A 2019 report by the Invisible Institute in Chicago documented thousands of police misconduct complaints that resulted in zero disciplinary action because fellow officers either refused to corroborate civilian accounts or actively disputed them. In New York City, the CCRB Civilian Complaint Review Board has documented for decades how difficult it is to sustain complaints against officers when the department controls the investigation. The system of police accountability in America is fundamentally broken, and it is broken in ways that specifically harm black and brown communities because those are the communities most likely to file complaints, most likely to be in contact with police, and least likely to be believed when something goes wrong. Paul Fensick got caught because he made it impossible not to catch him. He showed up drunk to roll call, he drove a marked police vehicle on camera, he blew more than twice the legal limit. Most misconduct doesn't come with that level of evidence. Most of it happens in the dark, on the side of a road, in an interrogation room, in a moment that is officer's word against civilian's word, and we know how that math works. So what do we do with this? First, we acknowledge what went right. The officers who noticed acted. Chief McManus publicly condemned the behavior and called for expedited termination. There was no attempt, as far as we know, to quietly reassign Fensick or sweep this under the rug. That is what accountability looks like at the procedural level, and it matters. But accountability cannot stop at the individual, because Paul Fensick is not an anomaly, he is a product. He is a product of a profession with historically high rates of alcohol use disorder. Studies estimate that between 11 and 23% of law enforcement officers meet the clinical criteria for problem. Drinking, compared to around 7% of the general population. He is a product of a culture that does not adequately monitor, support, or intervene with officers who are struggling. He is a product of a system where an officer can apparently bring a cooler of beer to work in a patrol car, and it takes showing up visibly intoxicated to roll call before anyone does anything. What accountability looks like at the systemic level is mandatory, randomized, alcohol, and substance testing. It is mental health and addiction support that officers are not penalized for using. It is early intervention protocols that flag behavior changes before they become criminal. It is civilian oversight boards with real power, not advisory roles, not rubber stamps, but actual authority to investigate and discipline. And it is a reckoning with what it means for communities of color to be policed by a system that cannot or will not police itself. Fensick is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The legal process will run its course. But the deeper question, the one that doesn't go away when this case is closed, is who else is out there? Who else is showing up impaired? Who else has a routine that nobody has caught yet? And who's going to pay the price when they do? This story out of San Antonio is one data point, one arrest, one officer. But it opens a window into something much larger, the relationship between officer fitness, racial bias, and community safety. And for Black Americans, that relationship is not abstract. It is the traffic stop. It is the knock on the door. It is the encounter that you didn't ask for and can't opt out of. The fact that Fensick's colleagues caught him matters. The fact that he's facing consequences matters. But justice is not just about what happens to one man. It's about building systems that protect communities before the drunk officer with the cooler full of beer makes it out onto the street. We're going to keep watching this case. Drop a comment. What do you think should happen? What does real accountability look like to you? And if this video opened your eyes, share it. Because the only way these stories create change is if enough people are paying attention. I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, same thing, eyes and eyes only, don't use your head. I'm going to go up with it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, Paul, go ahead and relax. Alright, sir. Next thing I'm going to ask you to do is face the wall over there, okay? Imagine a straight line, okay? I need you to place your left foot on said line. Try to go towards the middle there, a little bit to your right. Right there, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, place your right foot touching heel to toe in front of your left foot, arms by your side. I need you to maintain that position until I tell you to begin. Do you understand, Paul? Can I get a verbal yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. When I tell you to begin, sir, you're going to take 9 heel to toe steps straight along that imaginary line. As you're walking along that line, you're going to look down at your feet, count your steps out loud, looking down at your feet. Once you start, you can't stop. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate 3 steps. You're going to do 9. And then I'll simulate the turn and steps back, okay? Once I tell you to begin, what you're going to do, you're going to walk along that imaginary line just like so. 1, 2, 3. This is your simulated 9th step. Once you get to your 9th step, you can take a series of small turns in steps in a safe and controlled manner to create a turn. 9 heel to toe steps back. 1, 2, 3. Again, Paul, once I tell you to start, make sure you're walking along that line, touching heel to toe, arms by your side, counting your steps out loud. Looking down at your toes, and once you start, you cannot stop. Do you have any questions for me?
No, sir.
No? Okay, so whenever you're ready, you may begin.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 back.
As I instructed, sir.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, Paul. So, this is going to be the one leg stand. At this point, I need you to put your feet together, arms by your side, just like this. Okay? And then, when I tell you to begin, or I need you to maintain that position until I tell you to begin. Do you understand, Paul? Okay. When I tell you to, you're going to raise whichever foot you desire, your whole leg. Left or right, does not matter, it's your choice. And, no, when I tell you to begin, Paul, hold on.
I'll see which one we're doing.
When I tell you to begin, you're going to raise whichever foot, left or right, does not matter, approximately 6 inches off the ground. That foot's going to be parallel to the ground. Your legs are going to be straight, arms by your side, looking down at your toe and counting out loud just like this. 1001, 1002, 1003 until I tell you to stop. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate that real quick for you. It's going to look like this. 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on until I tell you to stop. Do you have any questions, Paul?
Okay. No.
Give me 1 second. Whenever you're ready, Paul, begin.
1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010, 1011, 1012, 1013, 1014, 1015, 1016, 1017, 1018, 1019, 1020.
Okay, go ahead and stop. All right, Paul. Next thing I'm asking you to do, feet together on by your side.
Like this?
Yes, sir. Just like that. Okay, what I'm going to do is 2 circles close to your face. Okay, come to a brief pause and come towards your nose. Okay, I'm not going to touch you, sir. I just need you to focus on it, just like the horizontal gaze and nystagmus exam. Okay. You ready? Yeah. Okay. One more time. Make sure you're keeping your head still, sir. Okay. All right, maintaining that position, I'm going to ask you to do another exam. What I need you to do with your feet together, arms right side like I instructed. Go ahead and get in that position for me. Feet together. You're going to tilt your head back and close your eyes when I tell you to begin. No, when I tell you to, Paul. Okay. Just keep looking at me so you know what it looks like. When I tell you to begin, you'll tilt your head back and close your eyes. My eyes are early open because I'm demonstrating. And you're going to, once you believe the passage of 30 seconds has elapsed, look back at me, say stop, indicate to me that you're done the passage of 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, whenever you're ready, tilt your head back, close your eyes. Okay. Yeah. That was 30 seconds? Mm-hmm. How did you count exactly? Did you just count by numbers? Did you, like Mississippi's, anything like that?
Just regular numbers.
Just 1, 2, just like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul. With your feet together, can you point down at the ground like this? Okay. Rotate your wrists outward like this. Okay, and I need you to stay in that position until I tell you to begin. Do you understand, Paul? Okay. When I tell you to begin, you're going to tilt your head back and close your eyes, and I'm going to call out either left or right. Can you raise your left hand for me? Right now. Can you raise your left hand for me? Okay, so you know your left from right. Okay. So when I tell you to, you're going to, when I call out left, for example, you're going to, with your head back, eyes closed, you're going to touch the tip of your nose with the tip of your finger and immediately back down. Don't use the pad of your finger. This is the pad of your finger. Don't use it. You're using the tip of your finger.
Okay.
Okay, same thing with right. Eyes back, or head back, eyes closed, tip of the finger to your right index finger, back down. Don't wait for me to tell you to drop it back down. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Tilt your head back, close your eyes. Left. Right. Left. Right. Right. Left. Okay, go ahead and relax, Paul. Okay, Paul. What's your highest level of education you've done?
Some college.
Some college? Okay. So you know the alphabet, you know the numbers, everything like that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you, without counting, or without saying the song, the alphabet song, could you say the alphabet from C to P?
Backwards?
No, just C to P.
C to P?
Yes, sir. C and the alphabet to P.
C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Okay. And could you count backwards from 54 to 41?
54, 53, 52, 51, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Paul. I'm going to have to do the uncomfortable thing, right? Just turn around.
I got pairs on my hips. Okay, you sit straight across and sit all the way back.
My hips don't work like that.
Okay, just sit right here.
My hips don't work like that.
You just need to sit.
No.
Just have a seat, we'll tell you how to sit in there.
You can't tell me my hips ought to work. My hips don't work like that, bro. My hips don't work like that. My hip.
Okay.
Put the camera on.
Get him.
My hips don't work like that. Put the camera on.
Sit down yourself.
My hips don't work like that. I got bilateral hip surgery. I got bilateral hip surgery. I got bilateral hip surgery. My hips don't work like that. You push it on me.
Get in.
I got bilateral hip surgery. No.
Come on.
My hips don't work like that. I just told y'all.
Look,
Get the paddy wagon.
forward and move
No,
sit down. And
my hip don't work like that.
Okay.
My hip don't work like. Got your camera on.
Okay, get in.
Got your camera on.
Get in.
Got your camera on. My hips don't work like that.
I need you to
My hips don't work like.
It was after 2 in the morning on April 11th, 2022. Dallas police were rushing to a strip mall on Dallas Parkway in far north Dallas. The call that came in? Active shooter. Officers flooded the parking lot, ready for the worst. There was no shooter. It was an alleged fight. Someone thought a fist fight sounded like gunshots. The officers cleared the scene, told people to go home, made sure nobody missed their rideshare cars. Routine crowd dispersal, nothing more. Cedric Cheely was there that night. He wasn't a suspect. He wasn't involved in any fight. He lived within walking distance of that strip mall. He walked up to Sergeant John Matthew Martinez's patrol vehicle and struck up a casual conversation, joking about how many police were out that night.
Well, you don't want to drive intoxicated. That's too many police out here. You might go to jail.
Intoxicated.
Huh?
Martinez told him about the shooter call. They laughed it off together. Martinez told Cedric it was probably better he walk home rather than drive, suspecting he'd had some drinks. And here is where this story takes a turn that will make you sick. The body camera footage shows that Cedric eventually agreed to walk home. Officer Randy Roden even thanked him. It was done. The situation was resolved. Cedric was leaving. But here's what the body camera also caught Martinez, off to the side, telling fellow officers that the way to teach people like Cedric a lesson was to arrest them. People like Cedric. Let that phrase echo in your mind for a moment. Not people who were causing trouble, not people who were violent, people like Cedric. A black man in a parking lot at 2 in the morning who dared to know his rights and question whether he was actually intoxicated. Cedric came back toward the scene, unaware that his fate had already been decided by a sergeant who wanted to teach him a lesson. When he told officers that touching him without cause would be kidnapping, Roden was done with the conversation. No more. It's either yes or no. You go home, or I take you to jail. They arrested Cedric Cheely for public intoxication. And I want to be clear, he was never convicted. The officers didn't even show up to court. Instead, Cedric Cheely got 133 baton strikes to his feet. And then a federal judge gave the officer who did it qualified immunity. Let that sink in before we go any further.
Get your foot inside, man. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside.
Why are you hitting me?
Because you won't put it in. Put your foot in.
You ain't got no right to hit me.
If you are still watching, hit the like button and share this video right now. This is your way to support this channel in sharing stories that get swept under the rug. This channel exists because these stories need to be told, loudly and without apology. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's get into it. Now here's where we need to slow down, because this detail is everything. The moment officers began walking Cedric toward the squad car, he told them something critical. He had pins in his hips from bilateral hip surgery. His hips did not function the way a person without that surgery would. Getting into the back of a standard police squad car with his hands cuffed behind his back was not something his body could physically do the way they were demanding. He dropped to the ground. Officers called it resisting. But Cedric was 6 feet 6 inches tall and 325 pounds. His hips had surgical hardware in them. Forcing him into a cramped back seat of a squad car in handcuffs was causing him physical pain. And so he asked clearly, out loud, on camera, for a paddy wagon. A larger transport vehicle. Standard equipment that police departments use for exactly this kind of situation. Not a limousine. Not special treatment. A vehicle that fit his body. He asked for it twice. On camera, with witnesses. Sergeant Martinez's own sworn declaration later acknowledged that Cedric repeatedly demanded a paddy wagon. A senior corporal's own declaration confirmed that Cedric acknowledged he was going to jail. He wasn't refusing arrest. He wasn't refusing transport. He was asking for a vehicle his body could physically fit into. So why didn't they get the paddy wagon? Martinez gave 2 reasons in his declaration. 1, there were priority calls on the radio. 2, the paddy wagon was in another division and would require a formal request. That's it. That was the trade-off. A disabled black man's legal right to reasonable accommodation versus the inconvenience of making a radio request. They chose convenience. They forced Cedric into the back of a standard squad car. They got him in there, and then an officer noticed that Cedric's feet were hanging out of the open rear window. Now, I need you to really be present for this next part, because the numbers matter. Cedric Cheely was handcuffed. He was inside the vehicle. His feet were extended out of the open window, not because he was trying to escape, not because he was attacking anyone, but because his surgically altered hips were in pain and he needed to stretch his legs for relief. Sergeant Martinez ordered him to pull his feet in. He ordered it 53 times. And then he pulled out his baton. Dallas Police Department's own written policy, General Order 901, classifies the baton as an intermediate impact weapon. Their own use of force continuum places the baton at the level of active aggression, 2 full tiers above passive resistance. Active aggression means someone is physically attacking you or posing an immediate physical threat. Cedric Cheely was handcuffed in the back of a car with his feet out the window. That is not active aggression. That is a disabled man in pain. And Sergeant Martinez hit him with that baton 133 times. 133 times. On his feet. On the bottom of his feet, the sides of his feet, the top of his feet. Over and over and over again. While Cedric asked why he was being hit, while he said the officer had no right to do this. While 3 other officers stood around and watched every single swing and did not once say, "Stop." Not once. "It felt like red ants stinging the bottom of my feet," Cedric said afterward. Repeatedly. That's the best way I can explain it. He didn't just walk away from that night sore. Cedric Cheely has permanent nerve damage in his feet. Nerve damage that, as he put it himself, is going to last him for the rest of his life. It is not going away. And after all 133 strikes, after all that pain, after all that the officers still couldn't get his feet inside the vehicle. So you know what they did? They drove him to Dallas County Jail with his feet hanging out of the moving car window. No seatbelt, feet outside a moving police vehicle on a Dallas highway. Because apparently repositioning him was too much work after they'd already beaten him over 100 times. I want you to think about the mentality it takes to look at that situation. A handcuffed, disabled black man, crying out in pain, asking why he's being beaten, and keep swinging. For 133 strikes. And then shrug and drive off with his feet out the window. Before I get to the investigation, I need to share with you what the Dallas City Attorney's Office had the audacity to write in their legal brief. Page 1. Opening sentence. They described what happened as Sergeant Martinez lightly tapping his baton on Cheely's feet. Lightly tapping. Martinez himself, in his sworn declaration, described it as more flicking the baton to inflict an annoyance. An annoyance. 133 strikes. Permanent nerve damage. An annoyance. The civil rights attorney on this case, Brandon Greil, was so struck by that language that he actually picked up a police baton himself and had people lightly tap themselves with it, colleagues, family members. After just a handful of gentle taps, it hurt. The skin started stinging, and that's without any real force. After fewer than 20 strikes, now imagine 133. There is nothing light about what happened to Cedric Cheely's feet that night. Here is what makes this case even more maddening. Dallas Police Department's own Internal Affairs Division did the right thing at first. 9 months after the incident, they completed their investigation. They reviewed every second of body camera footage. They counted the strikes. 133. Confirmed. Undisputed. And they concluded that the force was unnecessary, that it was not authorized, that it violated department policy. All 4 officers received written reprimands for transporting a prisoner improperly. Martinez specifically received an additional reprimand for inappropriate use of force and for failing to complete what DPD calls a response to resistance report, the form where an officer has to explain in writing why they used level of force they used. The fact that this report was never completed tells you everything, because to complete it, Martinez would have had to write down a justification for hitting a handcuffed disabled man 133 times with a baton while 3 officers watched. And there is no justification for that. On January 17, 2023, Sergeant Martinez signed off on his written reprimand. It went on his record, alongside 41 commendations. But here's the gut punch. 7 days later, Assistant Police Chief Michael Igo, who is now the interim Dallas Police Chief, stepped in and rescinded the reprimands for 3 of the officers related to the improper prisoner transport. His letter said, after careful review, it was his decision to rescind the recommendation. No further explanation. No accountability. 3 officers who stood and watched 133 baton strikes walked away with nothing on their record. DPD declined to comment publicly, citing the ongoing lawsuit. And by the way, Cedric was charged with public intoxication. The officers never showed up to court. He was not convicted. Cedric Cheely filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. He argued 2 things. First, that the baton strikes violated his 4th Amendment right against unreasonable seizure, in other words, excessive force. Second, that the 3 officers who stood there and watched violated his rights by failing to intervene. The case landed in the courtroom of Judge Brantley Starr of the Northern District of Texas, and Judge Starr granted qualified immunity to all 4 officers. Now let me explain qualified immunity to you, because this doctrine is one of the most powerful and most unjust shields in American law, and you need to understand exactly how it works to understand why Cedric lost. Qualified immunity was not written by Congress. It was not in the original civil rights statute that was meant to protect people like Cedric. Section 1983, passed in 1871, says that a government official who violates your constitutional rights shall be liable, shall, full stop. That law was written in the aftermath of the Civil War specifically to protect Black Americans from exactly this kind of state-sanctioned violence. But in the 1980s, the Supreme Court layered something on top of it. They said that even if an officer violates your rights, they get immunity, unless you can point to a prior court decision with facts close enough to theirs that any reasonable officer should have known their conduct was unconstitutional. In other words, you have to find a previous case where a cop did almost exactly the same thing and a court said it was unconstitutional. If that previous case doesn't exist, the officer walks free no matter what they did. And here's the trap, the spiral that one conservative Fifth Circuit judge named Don Willett has publicly called a Kafkaesque stairwell. Courts increasingly skip the question of whether something was unconstitutional and just grant immunity because there's no prior case. But if courts never say something is unconstitutional, then there's never a prior case to point to. So the next victim can't find precedent either, and the cycle continues. Heads, the defendant wins. Tails, the plaintiff loses. That is the doctrine that swallowed Cedric Cheely's case. Judge Starr's ruling was 6 pages long. 6 pages for a man with permanent nerve damage who was struck 133 times while handcuffed and disabled. Judge Starr skipped the question of whether the force was unconstitutional altogether. He went straight to prong 2. Is the law clearly established? He said Cedric failed to identify a single prior case where an officer acting under similar circumstances was found to have violated the Constitution. And because of that, Martinez was entitled to immunity as a matter of law. The other 3 officers got immunity too, because if Martinez didn't violate a clearly established right, there was nothing for them to have intervened to stop. But here is what made me stop and stare at this ruling. Judge Starr's entire analysis rests on one assumption that Cedric was choosing to keep his feet out the window, that he was deliberately disobeying commands rather than physically being unable to comply. But that's exactly what's in dispute. That's the whole point. Cedric told the officers more than 30 times that he had surgical pins in his hips and could not position his body the way they demanded. The officers themselves acknowledged this in their sworn declarations. The city's own legal brief admitted he asked for the paddy wagon. Whether Cedric could comply or whether he was refusing to comply is a factual question, and at the stage of the case where this ruling was made summary judgment, factual disputes are supposed to go to a jury. The judge is not supposed to resolve them, but Judge Starr resolved it against Cedric. And here is the detail that I believe is critical in 6 pages about a disabled Black man who was beaten 133 times. Judge Starr never once used the word disability. Not once. Now, I'm going to share something with you that stopped me cold when I learned it. Before Judge Brantley Starr was a federal judge, he was a law clerk. His first judicial mentor, the man from whom he learned to read the law, was Judge Don Willett of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The same Judge Don Willett who has publicly, in written opinions, criticized qualified immunity as a Kafkaesque spiral. The same Judge Willett who wrote in 2018 that this doctrine creates an infinite loop where constitutional questions go unanswered precisely because they go unanswered. Judge Starr's qualified immunity ruling in Cedric Cheely's case is a textbook example of exactly what his own mentor said was broken about this doctrine. And I want to be fair, Judge Starr is not a timid judge. When he believes a constitutional right is being violated, he writes with force. He once ordered Southwest Airlines lawyers into 8 hours of religious liberty training as a court sanction. He has written that religious discrimination in America is becoming socially acceptable, but legally intolerable. He has that voice. He has that moral clarity when he chooses to use it. Cedric Cheely, handcuffed, disabled, Black, beaten 133 times, with permanent nerve damage, whose attackers were found by their own department to have violated policy, did not get that version of Judge Starr. We have to talk about the context of what happened in that parking lot before the baton ever came out. Martinez decided on camera that the way to teach people like Cedric a lesson was to arrest him. Cedric had done nothing violent. He had agreed to walk home. He was leaving. The only thing Cedric had done was know his rights, push back verbally, and refuse to be dismissed. This happens to Black men in America in a pattern so consistent it has its own documented history. The assertion of rights, the refusal to be invisible, coded as a threat. The decision to arrest, not because of danger, but because of pride, because of the need to teach someone a lesson. And then, when the physical confrontation came, when a disabled black man's body literally could not comply with what was being demanded, that physical reality was treated as defiance. His pain was treated as resistance, and the response to that perceived defiance was 133 strikes with a baton. The nerve damage in Cedric Cheely's feet is permanent. He did not get that from a fair fight. He got it from a system that decided he needed to be taught a lesson, and then when the lesson started causing visible harm, kept going anyway. Here is where I need you to pay close attention, because this story is not finished. This is not a story about something that happened and was resolved. This is happening right now. Cedric Cheely's case is currently before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Attorney Brandon Griel is fighting for him, and the appeal is live. The Fifth Circuit will review this case completely fresh, what lawyers call de novo review. They are not bound by Judge Starr's analysis. They look at the full record as if they are seeing it for the first time and issue their own ruling. There are strong arguments for reversal. First, the disability issue was never addressed. Judge Starr never acknowledged that whether Cedric could comply was a disputed fact that belonged to a jury. That alone may be reversible error. Second, the Supreme Court has recognized that some cases of excessive force are so obvious that they do not require a prior precedent with identical facts. 133 baton strikes against a handcuffed disabled man whose own department sustained use of force violations could be argued to fall in that category. Third, the constitutional question was skipped entirely. The appeals court may find that it needs to be addressed directly. The Fifth Circuit is not a court known for its progressivism, but it contains judges, including Don Willett himself, who have put their criticism of qualified immunity in writing. The argument being made on Cedric's behalf is not a radical one. It is simply this: a man with permanent nerve damage, beaten 133 times while handcuffed, whose attacker's own department found policy violations, deserves to have a jury hear his case. He deserves his day in court. As this appeal moves forward, there are things to watch. Will the Fifth Circuit reach the constitutional question that Judge Starr skipped? Will they address the disability argument, the fact that could not comply and refuse to comply are two entirely different things with two entirely different legal implications? Will they apply the obvious case standard and find that this situation is so clearly excessive that no prior precedent is needed? And if they do send this back, if Cedric finally gets his jury, what does accountability actually look like for 133 strikes, permanent nerve damage, and 4 officers who either swung the baton or stood and watched? These are the questions that are being answered right now in a federal appeals court on behalf of a black disabled man who just wanted a paddy wagon and ended up with a life sentence of nerve damage instead. We will be covering every development in this case as it moves through the Fifth Circuit. If you want to stay updated, if you believe that stories like Cedric Cheely's deserve to stay in the public conversation, if you're tired of watching black people get beaten and watching courts invent reasons why nobody has to answer for it, subscribe to this channel, share this video, because the only thing more powerful than a corrupt system is a public that refuses to look away. Cedric Cheely is still waiting for justice. The least we can do is make sure the world knows his name.
What's up? All right. Get your foot inside, man. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside. Get your foot inside.
Why are you hitting me?
Because you won't put it in. Put your foot in.
You ain't got no right to hit me.
And put your foot in. You're not listening.
You have no right to hit me.
I do.
No, you don't.
You're not listening.
No.